You walk into a room. You don't think about it. You just walk in. But in the half second before you sit down, your eyes already did something you never gave them permission to do. They scanned the exits. They found the windows. They located every other person and quietly ranked them as safe or not safe. You didn't decide to do this. Your brain did it for you. And it's been doing it for longer than you've been human. Psychologists call it environmental scanning. Most people call it nothing, because most people never notice it happening. Gabriel Radvansky, a cognitive scientist at Notre Dame, spent years studying something closely related, what he called the doorway effect. The strange way your memory resets the moment you pass through a threshold. Walk into a new room to grab your keys, and suddenly you can't remember why you're standing there. Radvansky's research showed this wasn't forgetfulness. It was your brain treating the doorway as a hard boundary, closing one mental file and opening another. A new space means a new set of rules. A new space means new threats. So your mind clears the desk and starts scanning again. Why would a doorway matter that much? Go back further than doorways. Go back before houses, before walls, before doors existed at all. Your ancestors didn't walk into rooms. They walked into clearings, caves, riverbanks, unfamiliar terrain that could be hiding a predator behind every rock. The ones who paused at the edge of a space and quickly assessed it survived longer than the ones who wandered in without looking. That pause wasn't laziness. It was a tiny piece of insurance, repeated thousands of times a day, across thousands of generations. The habit didn't disappear when we built houses. It just changed its target. Instead of scanning for lions, you're scanning for exits, for strangers, for anything that breaks the pattern of what a safe space is supposed to look like. This is where the anthropologist Edward T. Hall becomes useful. In the 1960s, Hall studied something he called proxemics, the invisible bubble of space every person carries around their body. He mapped it in rings: intimate space, close enough to touch; personal space, close enough to talk quietly; social space, the distance you keep from someone you just met; public space, the distance you keep from a stranger or a threat. Hall noticed that people from different cultures drew these rings at different sizes, but every culture drew them. Nobody taught you where your rings begin and end. You just know. And the moment you walk into a room, you are unconsciously measuring every person against those invisible circles, deciding in a fraction of a second who gets to stand close and who has to stay far. Here's the part that should stop you. You are doing all of this before you've said a single word to anyone. The psychologist Erwin Altman, who studied territorial behavior for most of his career, described something he called primary territory, the spaces you treat as fully yours, and secondary territory, spaces you share but still feel some ownership over. Altman's work showed that humans mark territory constantly, not just with fences and property lines, but with posture, with eye contact, with where they choose to sit. Walk into a meeting room and watch what happens. People don't sit randomly. They claim a seat, and for the rest of the meeting, that seat is theirs. Nobody announced this rule. Everybody follows it anyway. Watch it happen at a family dinner where your uncle has his chair even though his name is nowhere on it. Nobody taught you this rule either, and yet you'd never take that seat. So what is actually happening in that first half second? Your brain is running a threat assessment, a social assessment, and a territorial assessment all at once, all before your conscious mind has caught up. It checks the exits because your ancestors who couldn't find a way out did not get to have descendants. It checks the faces because a room full of strangers required a different posture than a room full of your own tribe. It checks the open space because open space has always meant options, and options have always meant survival. This isn't paranoia. This is inheritance. You are carrying a fully loaded threat detection system built for a world of predators and rival tribes, and you're running it every time you walk into a coffee shop. Notice what you do the next time you enter somewhere new. You'll probably find a seat with your back to a wall. You'll probably angle yourself so you can see the door. You'll probably do this in a restaurant, in a waiting room, even in your own friend's living room. People who study behavior call this a defensible position, and it's one of the oldest habits humans have. Predators, and later hostile strangers, could not easily approach from behind if your back was already covered. So somewhere in your nervous system, a very old rule is still running. Never let your exit be the only way anyone finds you. Restaurants know this without ever reading a psychology paper. Booths against the wall fill up first. Tables in the open middle fill up last. Nobody tells you to avoid the middle. You just feel a little more exposed there, and you can't always explain why. Here's what makes this stranger than it sounds. None of this requires danger to be real. Your brain doesn't wait for evidence. It runs the scan regardless, every single time, in every single room, whether you're walking into a job interview or your own kitchen. The scanning never turns off, because for most of human history, turning it off was the one mistake you didn't get to make twice. Evolution doesn't build systems that relax once they're not needed. It builds systems that never stop running, because the cost of running them constantly is small, and the cost of missing one real threat is everything. Think about how fast this all happens. Neuroscientists studying threat perception have found that the brain can categorize a face as friend or stranger in under 100 milliseconds, faster than you can consciously register that you've even looked at someone. 100 milliseconds. That's less time than it takes to blink. Long before you form a thought like, "Who is that?" a much older part of your brain has already filed that person into a category, and that category is already quietly shaping how close you stand, how much you smile, how loudly you speak. This is also why certain rooms feel wrong before you can say why. Low ceilings can feel oppressive because they limit your options. Rooms with only one exit can feel subtly uncomfortable, even when nothing dangerous is happening. Bright open spaces with clear sightlines tend to feel calm, almost without effort, because your ancestors' version of calm was always the same thing. I can see everything, and everything can see that I'm ready. There's a mirror version of this instinct too. Notice how your shoulders drop the second you walk into your own home and close the door behind you. That release is the reward your nervous system gives you for finally reaching a space it has already classified as territory, a space where the ancient scanning program can finally power down. Even the layout of a party reveals this old machinery at work. Notice how people cluster near kitchens and doorways instead of spreading evenly across a room. Kitchens and doorways offer sightlines and exits at the same time. You gravitate there without thinking about it, the same way your ancestors gravitated toward the mouth of a cave rather than its deepest, darkest corner. So the next time you feel a flicker of unease in an unfamiliar room, before you can even say why, understand what that flicker actually is. It's not anxiety. It's not overthinking. It's 100,000 years of ancestors who paused at the edge of a clearing, checked the shadows, and decided it was safe enough to step forward. You inherited their caution the same way you inherited their hands and their eyes. You just call it something else now. You call it a gut feeling. You call it a vibe. You call it nothing at all because it happens too fast for language to catch it. Think about how much of your daily life runs on this invisible current. Every party you've ever walked into, every classroom, every office, every waiting room, every unfamiliar street, somewhere underneath the version of you that smiles and says hello, there's an older version still checking corners, still measuring distance, still deciding in complete silence whether this place is safe enough to stop scanning. It rarely fully stops. Not completely. Even in the rooms you know best, the scan still runs. Just quieter, just faster, tucked so far beneath conscious thought that you'll never catch it in the act. But it's there. It's always there. You walk into a room and you think you're just walking into a room. You're not. You're running a search that began long before doorways existed, long before rooms existed, long before you existed. And the strangest part isn't that you're still doing it. The strangest part is that you never noticed.